Welcome back to OnTheGrid Podcast, Season 5, Episode 15. And today we're going to be reviewing the Miami Grand Prix, a sprint weekend, so it always makes it a little bit more difficult. But joined with me as ever is Adrian. How are you doing today?
I'd be a lot better if I didn't have technical difficulties before recording this podcast. I certainly did have my heart in my mouth when I saw that my screen was black and I had a um, gigantic mouse cursor on my screen. But apart from that, I'm very good. The Miami Grand Prix was quite eventful. Yeah, looking forward to reviewing it and seeing what you thought of the whole weekend as a whole.
I mean, there were some good aspects. I don't think the race was necessarily a classic, let's say that.
The
As ever,
rain, the rain. Talk about the rain. Only in the sprint though. Only in the sprint, but like it impacted a little bit the
it
sprint.
did.
Only the sprint. Only the sprint. But apart from that, you've got to think about it. You're right. The race wasn't a classic. There literally was nothing going on. A certain Formula One driver's career has gone down the drain because of it. Well, you could say because of it. But we'll leave that one for another episode. But I'll let you get on. I'll let you jibber jabber because I've done too much talking.
Anyway, before I was rudely interrupted, we'll get on to kick things off with our 1 to 10 driver ratings we do for the sprint weekend. And we're going to kick things off from the Grand Prix order. So first of all, Oscar Piastri, he qualified for the sprint in second and finished second, and then qualified for the race in fourth and finished first. I've gone for a 10 out of 10 for Oscar Piastri. I think in the sprint he's very unlucky. He obviously got the move down on Antonelli down into turn one, which I thought was on the edge, but fair. And then he got very unlucky with the timing of the VSC, and then it was just a masterclass in the race. I think Norris was obviously catching, but I think Piastri also knew by that point it was a little bit too little, too late. So I don't think he was necessarily cooking his tyres. I think there was still some pace in reserve there, to be honest. So a 10 out of 10 from me. I think that it was an excellent showing from him.
I'm inclined to agree about Oscar Piastri. I did pull a little bit of a face because I was thinking, his qualifying performance wasn't great. His sprint performance, obviously, starting in second and finishing second, obviously the VSC wasn't it didn't help him at all at the back end of a sprint. Then you look at qualifying; he's been out qualified by Verstappen and Antonelli and his teammate Norris, and you're thinking is it going to be that sort of weekend where the streak is over, where the streak of wins for Oscar Piastri ends? But it didn't. He prevailed. He came through relatively quickly, and then the two McLarens were 30 seconds ahead of third placed man George Russell, which just speaks volumes of how quick and how good their car is. So yeah, I agree with you. 10 out of 10. Didn't really put a foot wrong, apart from qualifying, where you should realistically think that he should be qualifying on the front row. But apart from that, I don't think he put a foot wrong. So 10 out of 10.
Yeah, that is the only sort of mark against him, I think, was qualifying. And yet again, he was less than 2 tenths off pole position. There's not a big gap here exactly. But anyway, we're in agreement there. Next up, Lando Norris. He qualified for the sprint in third and finished first. Qualified for the race in second and finished second. And it's a 9 out of 10 for me. I thought it was a good performance. He obviously won the sprint, which wasn't a classic performance from him. It wasn't sort of Lando Norris getting back to his best, but it was an important one nonetheless. Like I say, he got lucky with a VSC, but other than that, he was all over the back of Piastri anyway. There's an argument to be had that if there was no rain at all, then he would have overtaken Piastri and won the sprint. In the race, I think that's turn one incident with Verstappen. He has to make that move, but I think he just needs to show a little bit more racing IQ and almost have control over his emotions, because I think that's what Piastri has the edge on him over that, and that's why he was able to make the move a lot quicker, whereas Norris sort of squandered better opportunities than Piastri had. Piastri obviously forcing Verstappen into that mistake. It was a good performance though, second place, and he was hunting down Piastri by the end. But like I said, it was just those extra few laps stuck behind Verstappen which really cost him a few seconds. So it's a 9 out of 10. It's a big improvement, I think, though.
I've only gone point 0.5 of grade less. I know you don't like your point 0.5s. I do, and I stick with it. So I've given Lando Norris 9.5. Um, it's a good weekend. It's a massive improvement from the last couple of races where he's really been on edge and kind of we've seen Oscar Piastri kind of take the McLaren lead a lot more. But I think this weekend was always going to be a little bit special for Lando Norris, especially that he won the same race 12 months ago, which was his first race victory in Formula One. Um, he qualified third in a sprint and won that race, and then qualified second, and then finished second. It's just consistent. It's sort of he's been outshone by his teammate in the race. And it was clear to see because, like you mentioned, I think Lando Norris does kind of like that sort of composure, that calm edge that Oscar Piastri does have. And saying that Oscar Piastri is younger than Lando Norris, so Lando should kind of know better. But when it comes to Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, there's always a bit of a heated rivalry. There's always a bit of a ding dong battle, and I think we saw that in Miami. And between Piastri and Verstappen, Piastri set Verstappen up very well and overtook him into turn one. So, you know, it's slight little differences between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris that sees obviously Oscar Piastri lead in the championship, but for Lando it's a return to the better, and I think maybe if he continues wearing that shiny helmet, maybe he will daze a few drivers and maybe he'll gain a few more positions in races to come. But I thought he was back to his best. Very good performance. 9.5 out of 10.
Next up is George Russell. He qualified for the sprint in fifth and finished fourth, qualified for the Grand Prix in fifth and finished third. This is a difficult one to grade. I'm actually going to go for an 8 out of 10 for Russell because I don't think it was Russell at his best. I think he benefited a lot in the main race. Obviously, he was down in fifth and he wasn't making any inroads on Verstappen or Antonelli as well. Antonelli was quicker than Russell all weekend, and for someone of Russell's experience, that would be a bit disappointing. Still, though, you've got to hold your hands up. He's managed to get a podium out of it. Perhaps fortunately, like I said, due to the timing of the VSC in the race, but nonetheless, it is a podium. Yeah, I think he held off Verstappen quite well in the end as well. Maybe 8 is a bit harsh, but I'm going to go for an 8.
Yeah, I think it is a very harsh grade, especially when, he was so consistent throughout the weekend. Obviously, qualifying fifth for the sprint, finishing fourth, fifth in qualifying, then to get a podium. I've gone personally for a 9 out of 10. I think George Russell, there was a stat that Formula One put out. Formula One love to put out pointless stats. But there's a stat that Formula One put out that George Russell has actually, I think, equaled his tally of podiums in the first six races that he did last season, if I'm not mistaken. And the Mercedes car has been very, very strong. Arguably, you could look at them as the second quickest car on the grid right now because behind the wheel of George Russell and Kimi Antonelli, who was very strong this weekend, they have a really, really good car this season, and I think they've kind of bounced back from their sort of mishaps of the last season and the season before. They've had a bit of a hangover period and now they're kind of in it to win it sort of territory. And George Russell always seems to be up there, always collecting the podium finishes. And he did that just again in Miami. So I don't think it's like you said, I don't think it was a fantastic George Russell performance throughout the whole weekend. Obviously, ending up 30 seconds behind the two McLaren drivers. But like I've already said, you've got to be in it to win it, and he was right there in the right time in the right place at the right time, and scooped up another podium finish. So I've settled with a 9 out of 10.
You say he was consistent all weekend, but he was consistently slower than his teammate at the same time. But anyway,
Yeah, but you've got to think about it. Where has Antonelli finished and where has George Russell finished?
But you also have to look
So
at the reasons why.
yeah, it's fine. Like I've said, you've got to be in it to win it. You've got to be in the right place at the right time. George Russell was in the right place at the right time. One's got a podium finish, one's finished down in sixth.
Anyway, Alex Albon next. He qualified for the sprint in eighth and finished 11th. Qualified for the race in seventh and finished fifth.
You've
It's a 10
missed
out of
out
10.
Verstappen.
Oh, do we miss out Verstappen? Okay. Um,
Yes.
so now Max Verstappen qualified for the sprint in fourth and finished 17th. Qualified for the race in first and finished eighth. I'm going for an 8 out of 10. A very solid performance. Fourth place is a good result considering where that Red Bull is. But you can't give him any higher. Obviously, the sprint will discount that because that's not his fault at all. And I think he came onto the radio and was basically saying that as well. He's an absolute passenger there, just going according to the green light on the pit on the in the pit window. But he just didn't really have the pace. He didn't really have the pace to challenge Russell. I think obviously his defensive driving was fantastic as it usually is, but wasn't able to get the podium today.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree on an 8 out of 10. I was thinking between a seven and an eight, but the sprint, like you mentioned, it's not his fault. I mean, it's always dangerous, whenever there's other drivers in the pit lane and you're getting an unsafe release, and then you're getting slapped with a 10-second time penalty you know, because of a light that's told you to go, but it wasn't even safe to go. It's fine margins, but in the race, qualified fantastically up in pole position. But like you mentioned, didn't really have the pace to challenge the two McLarens and George Russell. I think he was coming back towards George Russell in the latter stages, but I think it was too little, too late for him to make the move done on George Russell in the end. But as ever, Max Verstappen's defending kind of prowess was out on show. And whilst I was watching the race, we were always keeping a keen eye on who's in the lead, and Max Verstappen was just defending lap after lap after lap, and then unfortunately, Oscar Piastri overtook him for the lead of the race, and then he kind of just fell down the order a little bit. But consistent, very good drive. P4 was probably the highest he was going to finish in the end.
Alex Albon now qualified for the sprint in eighth and finished 11th. He qualified for the Grand Prix in seventh and finished fifth. It's 10 out of 10, right? It's Albon. I don't think there's any shocks there. He finished fifth in the road, which would have been fourth on the sprint race had he not got that penalty. I think he was unfortunate as well because looking at it, he did have Russell right behind him when the VSC came out. So if he slammed on the brakes and Russell's going straight into the back of him. Um, so that was where that infringement came from. But it's a very, very good performance. Fifth in a Williams is fantastic. And he continues to deliver this season. So an easy 10 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, agreed. I think another useless stat that was put out, Alex Albon has finished in the points in all but one race. And to say that Ferrari could soon be challenging Williams for fourth place, you know, actually makes my head hurt. But less said about Ferrari in Miami, the better, I think. But Alex Albon, yeah, fantastic weekend all round. The sprint, he was unfortunate as well. Got himself a 5-second time penalty. And then in the race, he was absolutely on flames. Obviously got out qualified by Carlos Sainz, but in the race, his race pace was just on another level. And obviously, Carlos went on the radio regarding the little switcheroo that Williams made, and he wasn't very happy. But Alex Albon showed tremendous pace. Beat off a Mercedes, beat two Ferraris. It speaks volumes. But yeah, 10 out of 10, all the way to the bank.
Absolutely. Moving on now to sixth place man, Antonelli. So he qualified for the sprint in first, as we know, and finished seventh. He qualified for the Grand Prix in third and finished sixth. This is probably the most difficult one to grade. I'm going to go for a 9 out of 10. He's done a fantastic job in both qualifying sessions. Obviously the pole on the Friday, and then to put it on the second row again on the Saturday is fantastic. Out qualifying Oscar Piastri, the championship leader. The sprint, he is so unlucky. I know he's inherited a few places and actually finished seventh because of the penalties. But the fact he had a drive-through penalty. He served a drive-through penalty because he had to abort his pit stop, then come out, then go all the way around again, and then come into the pit. And that was the pit for slicks, which would have cost him a bunch of time anyway, doing an extra lap on the inters, let alone with all of the what happened with Verstappen's unsafe release as well. So there was the opportunity for a podium possibly in the sprint, and then again it's a VSC that's cost him. He's pit before Russell, and he was running ahead of Russell for that entire first stint. He was running in fourth place, not too far behind Verstappen. It looked like he was the one that would challenge for the podium, and Russell just didn't have the pace. But a fortunate break for Russell gave him the advantage and gave him the podium. And then I think Antonelli's pace it diminished in the second stint, and Albon was obviously able to get him. But I still think it's a brilliant performance from him, and he deserves a 9 out of 10.
You know, I'm also kind of finding it difficult to grade Antonelli because you look on the flip side of things, you look at his sprint shootout and his qualifying, fantastic. The sprint was also very good until he had to do what he had to do. And then in the race, you're looking at the VSC kind of preventing him from getting anywhere close to the podium. Um, I'm inclined to agree on a 9 out of 10. I think that Antonelli showed strong pace throughout the whole weekend. You just had a lot of unfortunate events unfold in front of him, which saw him kind of unable to get a podium finish. But he's so quick from obviously from F2 jumping straight to F1. Uh, on one lap, the guy is rapid. He's rapid. And you know, getting his first pole. And obviously starting on the second row on the Sunday. It just speaks volumes. But he's just got to turn that one lap pace to race pace and not be screwed over, shall we say, throughout the races. But he looks very good. He looked very quick. Like I say, just a few unfortunate events unfolded in front of him, which kind of did not help him at all and did not help his cause of trying to get a podium. So I've settled with a 9 out of 10, same as you. Very strong weekend from Antonelli.
Charles Leclerc next qualified for the sprint in sixth and did not finish or did not start. Qualified for the race in eighth and finished seventh. I'm going for a 6 out of 10 for Charles Leclerc. He's obviously cost himself a chance at extra points in sprint, which 19 drivers made it through and he didn't. So you've got to criticize him for that. And then in the race, we'll get onto it with Lewis Hamilton because I think it's more appropriate here. But Ferrari just incompetence has cost them a chance at getting extra points. Because Hamilton was on the far better strategy, and Leclerc didn't have a great qualifying session either. Got out qualified by both Williams, and then wasn't able to make inroads into them. It was only on the second stint that he did, and then he wasn't able to push further on and look at getting Antonelli or Albon. So a disappointing weekend for Ferrari. We'll get on to all the team orders and everything with Lewis Hamilton because I think it's more appropriate there.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you. I've gone with a 6. The less said about Ferrari's weekend, the better, because we've spoken so many praises regarding Ferrari strategies and team decisions up to now. And in Miami, they just put their clown outfits back on again. We were actually messaging back and forth when we saw what was unfolding, and we were both fuming at the situation because from what on one perspective, Lewis Hamilton's on the medium tire, so it's the quicker tire. Everybody knows that, and he's obviously on the better strategy regarding tire wise. But then on the other hand, Charles Leclerc, obviously his pace was good, and they were catching Antonelli, but just not quick enough. And whether Lewis Hamilton could have caught Kimi Antonelli and they could have both been on the back of Antonelli by the end of a race and overtaken him to take home sixth and seventh. It looks a little bit better on paper, but it still doesn't look great for Ferrari and it doesn't bode well for them. But Miami is certainly a write off of a Scuderia, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Lewis Hamilton up next. He qualified for the sprint in seventh and finished third. Qualified for the race in 12th and finished eighth. I am going for an 8 out of 10, and that is heavily weighting on the sprint race. Because then let's talk about the positives. The sprint race was fantastic. He was absolutely flying on those soft tires. I don't think he would have had Lando if the VSC had come out. I think the gap was slightly too big, but I think he picked the mediums and so did Piastri. So, with the tyre advantage, you never know. I doubt he would have made it any further in rows, but he was absolutely flying. A great overtake on Verstappen as well. In the race now, even before they overtake Sainz, as soon as Hamilton gets up to the back of Leclerc, they need to switch the cars. Hamilton had been on those tyres for 3 laps or something like that. And then Leclerc was on the hard tyres. He's been on them for about the same sort of time because they both pit under the VSC. They needed to swap them whilst Hamilton had the tyre advantage. But no, they faffed around for 5 laps until they both overtook Sainz. And then by that point, running in the dirty air, losing the grip on the tyre, Hamilton had lost the tyre advantage. The difference in pace had been reduced to pretty much even by that point. Then they swapped the cars and they only give them, 4 or 5 laps in clean air before swapping them back again. When Hamilton swapped the position back, the gap to Antonelli was 2.4 seconds. That then dropped to 3 seconds when Hamilton gave up his position. So he lost 0.6 of a second doing that swap. Leclerc finished, I think it was 1.4 seconds behind Antonelli. That is enough to get into DRS range. So instead of faffing around, swapping the cars twice, if they had just stuck to their guns, at least one of them would have finished ahead of Antonelli. So whether they didn't swap at all and then Leclerc could attack, or whether they only swapped the once and Hamilton could attack. Either way, they had the ability to get a better position here. And that's not all. Like, if they'd done it earlier, when Hamilton actually had the fresh rubber, he would have definitely got Antonelli. There's no reason to say why he couldn't have then gone on and had a go at Albon, because Albon was carrying some damage as well. It is complete incompetence from Ferrari. They need to get their act together if they're to finish fourth in the constructors. But there is an opportunity here to finish second quite comfortably. They're only 47 points behind Mercedes in second in the constructors. So there is an opportunity here to finish second in the constructors again, but not if they just show a lack of intelligence, awareness of racing. Of course, Hamilton's going to have the better tyre early in the stint, and then as the stint progresses, it's going to then favour Leclerc. So they've done the same number of laps on different compounds. But, rant over, I thought it was a good performance from Hamilton on the Saturday in particular, and that's sort of where I'm given the extra weighting.
I'm glad you've ranted about it because I just can't be bothered. I've given Hamilton a 7. I think obviously the podium finish gives him 1 grade higher than Leclerc. But it's a disaster. It's a disaster from Ferrari. And like I said, I'm glad that you ranted about it because when I was watching the race, I just couldn't believe my eyes. We saw what happened in China. Hamilton obliged with it. And then obviously what happens in Miami just shows the sort of I don't know whether lack of trust is the right word, but it's just a little bit of it's not incompetence, it's just stupidity in my opinion. Because like I mentioned with Leclerc in Leclerc's segment, Hamilton was on the better tyre, and they should have made the switch immediately. We saw so many teams making the switch immediately, and why Ferrari couldn't do that and having to dilly dally for 5 laps and then switch the cars back again. There was just no point of doing that. If you do the switch, you keep the switch, and then if nothing changes by the end of a race, you switch back. Worst case scenario. Yeah, 7 out of 10 for Lewis Hamilton. Good podium finish in the sprint, but apart from that, yeah, not good enough.
Next up is Carlos Sainz. He qualified for the sprint in 15th and did not finish. Qualified for the Grand Prix in 6th and finished 9th. And I've gone for an 8 out of 10 for Carlos Sainz. Again, it could have been more. I know he done that late move on Hamilton to the final corner, which I'm quite surprised he didn't get a penalty for, because there was no way that overtake was on in a million years. I don't think it would have cost him anything though, because I think the gap to Tsunoda was big enough, and he got the 5 second penalty as well. But nevertheless, I think it was a good performance from Sainz. He was working well in the first stint. I think there was actually some contact between him and Albon at turn one, and from the sounds of it, Sainz got some pretty hefty damage from it. So still to be battling the Ferraris for as long as he did is a great sign. Yeah, another solid performance, and I think Sainz is starting to bed himself into that team. 6th in qualifying is fantastic, and yeah, hopefully more of the same from him.
Yeah, I'll agree with you as well. I've gone with an 8 out of 10 for Carlos Sainz. You say he's bedding himself into the team, but if you actually listen to the team radio afterwards, he was distraught. James Vowles went on the radio and said, "Good race," and Carlos Sainz replied with, "I've lost confidence in everything." And it's a little bit bittersweet because he's still put on a very good show. He's still put on a very good race, and he's finished inside the points. Obviously, gaining just the 2 points instead of Albon's. Did Albon score 10 or so? I think he did. You know, it's two contrasting races, but I think Albon did have a pace advantage on Carlos. They obviously had a bit of an incident, which saw both of their cars slightly damaged, and I think Sainz's damage clearly impacted him a lot more than Albon's damage did. But he still finished, like I said, like I mentioned, inside the points, qualified very well in sixth on the third row. And it's signs of progress. It shows that Carlos Sainz is kind of bedded himself into the team and has got to grips with the Williams car. But when you go on the team radio and saying that you've lost confidence in everything, especially after your teammates beating you kind of fair and square, it's a little bit bittersweet. But I still think he put on a very good show for the Williams fans, and it shows that the only way is up for Carlos Sainz, and he's certainly showing signs of improvement in Williams.
Yuki Tsunoda, it's the last of the points finishers in the Grand Prix. He qualified for the sprint in 18th and finished 6th. Qualified for the race in 10th and finished 10th. I'm going for a 6 for Tsunoda. He obviously done brilliantly well to end up getting points in the sprint. I know that was because of the positions inherited, but I still think he finished 9th or 10th on the road, and kept it on the track where a lot of other drivers couldn't. And then in the race, he had a very quiet race. I feel like there wasn't a lot going on. He obviously didn't have the pace of Verstappen. I don't think the Red Bull was particularly quick this weekend, but wasn't able to make any inroads. He did get a stupid penalty, which would have deducted a grade had Hadjar been sort of half a second closer, because that would have knocked him out the points. But as it is, I'm going to give him a 6.
I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for Yuki Tsunoda. I think his sprint shootout, okay, it's not amazing by a long stretch, especially thinking that he's in a Red Bull. He should be getting out of SQ1. There's no way, unless your name is Liam Lawson, and then you're starting at the back of the grid. Sorry, Liam. But then to come through and obviously get the place inherited and then finished inside the points in sixth, fantastic. Gained, I believe, 12. Yeah, gained 12 places in the sprint. When you look at it, and then in the race, from after qualifying in 10th, finishing 10th, you should be realistically, you should be challenging Carlos Sainz, and maybe giving the two Ferraris a bit of a run for their money because those three cars are realistically achievable with your targets. But instead, he spent the whole kind of race battling with Hajar and fending off Ocon and co. And the penalty is stupid. Don't get me wrong, but he's very fortunate that he was able to pull that 5 second plus gap on Isaac Hajar because it could have been very bad for him in terms of his gradings and in terms of points. But I still think he had a decent enough weekend to give him a 7 out of 10.
Isaac Hadjar up next. He qualified for the sprint in ninth and finished 10th, qualified for the race in 11th and finished 11th. And I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10. Solid, nothing really to write home about. He obviously dropped a few positions in the sprint. So he's only made the ground back up again to finish 10th after all those penalties. And then in the main race, he just couldn't find that extra. I think it was a tenth and a half in the end that he finished off of Yuki Tsunoda with that 5 seconds applied. So it's unfortunate for him that he couldn't get into the points, but I don't think it was his weekend necessarily. But in good news, he was a lot quicker than Lawson all weekend. So I think Hadjar's been very impressive this season. This just necessarily wasn't his race.
You say quicker than Lawson. Is that hard nowadays? Because I'm digging it. I'm on smoke today. I'm sorry, Liam. But it's so easy to fire shots at Liam Lawson for some reason. But finally, yet again, Liam Lawson's got a week off to reset and go again, like I've been saying for the last couple of weeks. But with Isaac Hadjar, I've gone with a 7 out of 10. Again, steady weekend, just outside the points in sort of both of the races. Nothing really to write home about, nothing to really add on. Just steady, consistent, and kind of there or thereabouts regarding points finishes. Just a good weekend overall for him, I think. And for RB, unfortunate, obviously, not to get points and not to be within that 5 seconds of Yuki Tsunoda. But life goes on. I'm sure you'll get some points in Imola or the next races to come.
Esteban Ocon next qualified for the sprint in 12th and finished 12th. Qualified for the race in ninth and finished 12th. 6 out of 10. Very, very consistent, very solid, without hitting any extraordinary heights. We did talk about Esteban Ocon last week and said that he's due a good race because he's been flip-flopping a little bit this season, but it was probably about as middle of the road as you can get. Okay, not bad, but nothing brilliant. So 6 out of 10, I feel that's fair.
Literally just that. 12, 12, 9, 12, 6 out of 10. And it's consistently, there, just there lurking, like a meerkat to see if he can get any points, but he couldn't. Good qualifying performance to get into Q3, but then obviously dropped a few places, finished behind Hajar and Tsunoda, and didn't really have a sniff at points. Just consistent, consistently there. But yeah, like I said with Hajar, kind of just outside the points and wasn't able to make any inroads on Yuki Tsunoda and Carlos Sainz in 9th and 10th.
So up next is Pierre Gasly. He qualified for the sprint in 13th and finished 8th. Qualified for the race in 18th and finished 13th. Now I'm going for a 6 out of 10 purely on the basis that he got a point in the sprint. If it wasn't for that point in the sprint, it probably would be a 4 out of 10. Because if you look at the rest of his results for the weekend, they're not good at all. But, you've got to hand it to him. He's got the point. So I think the grade's got to reflect that, but also be considerate of the fact that take that away, it was a very poor performance. So that's why I've gone for a 6 out of 10. And I've also gone for a 6 out of 10 for Ocon, who was very middle of the road. I don't think that Gasly had a good weekend at all. But points mean prizes, an extra championship point for Alpine. And yeah, so 6 out of 10.
You know, I agree with you in a sense. Points do mean prizes. And to celebrate an eighth place finish in a sprint is a long stretch. But I do agree with you. Don't get me wrong. I do agree with you. I'm gonna also settle with the six because I was gonna say a five because the whole weekend for Pierre Gasly's just been very average, just been very meh, just been especially when you look at it, he was outqualified by his teammate, Jack Doohan, for the race. And if that isn't a backhand in the face, I don't know what is. But he got that point in the sprint, like you mentioned. Obviously inherited it because of a few penalties around him like I mentioned, for the likes of George Russell, and for other drivers up and down the grid, like Yuki Tsunoda as well, you've got to be in it to win it. You've got to be there and be counted, and you've got to be in the right time of in the right place at the right time. And he was, and he got that P8. So yeah, I'm gonna I'm inclined to agree with you on a 6 out of 10 for Mr. Pierre Gasly.
Nico Hulkenberg is next. He qualified for a sprint in 11th and finished ninth. Qualified for the race in 16th and finished 14th. Now, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I've also gone for a 6 out of 10. He got a ninth place finish in the sprint. And when you think about where that Sauber is, that is a very, very good result. But, the main prizes for the Sunday, and he only finished 14th. So that again brings it slightly down. So good, not fantastic, but very solid in the end. So I'm going to go for a 6 out of 10. Nico Hulkenberg.
And I'm don't mean to sound like a broken record as well, but I'm inclined to agree with you on a 6 out of 10. Like you mentioned, the sprint shootout and the sprint, so the Friday and the Saturday, very good. Uh, Qualifying, not so much. Again, an experienced teammate getting out qualified by their rookie teammate with Hulkenberg in 16th and Bortoletto in 13th. And then he finished 14th in the race. Yeah, it's good. For what Sauber for what the Sauber's like at the moment, it's a good race finish. But it's nothing to write home about, and I don't think anything will be in store for Sauber to write home about after their Australia excursions. At the moment, they just look to be, back to their garbage best. Yeah, 6 out of 10.
Fernando Alonso is next. He qualified for the sprint in 10th and did not finish. Qualified for the race in 17th and finished 15th. Yeah, again, it's a 6 out of 10. Now, I'm not doing this because I don't know what to give. I'm going straight down the middle. I genuinely think this is a 6 out of 10 performance. Was on for points in the sprint before he got sent into the wall by Liam Lawson. Which was actually, you think about the content and you think about the amount of damage there was. It was a little bit strange to see. It didn't look like it's at a slow corner, didn't look like the biggest shunt, but the car just disintegrated. So very strange there. And then on the Sunday, there's nothing at all to write home about. It was a shocking performance from both of them. But he did have a good performance on the Saturday, so I'll give him a little bit of recognition there. So 6 out of 10.
Get out of the way! I'm Liam Lawson. I'm Liam Lawson. And that meme was all over my TikTok after the accident that he had with Fernando Alonso. Um, I'm giving Fernando a five. Like you mentioned, he was on for points in the sprint, but Mr. Liam Lawson came along and went no, and just slapped him in the face. But then on the Sunday, he spun on his own into I can't remember what turn it was. Uh, yeah, I can't remember I don't have the Miami circuit on the back at the back of my head. But when he kind of spun on his own, and it was kind of that slow depressing kind of spin round, yeah, it was a little bit heartbreaking to see Fernando Alonso having to go through that. But I don't think the Aston Martins are anywhere near competing, for points at the moment. They're really lacking a sense of direction. Don't get me wrong, we'll go on to Lance Stroll in a minute and talk about his P5 in the sprint and big him up and hype him up, which we won't do. Um, but yeah, Aston Martin don't have a sense of direction. They're just waiting for 2026 to come along, and Adrian Newey to propel them up into stardom and into P1 in the Constructors' Championship. But at the moment, it just doesn't look good. So I've gone with a 5 out of 10 for Alonso.
Moving on to his teammate Lance Stroll, who qualified for the sprint in 16th and finished fifth, qualified for the race in 19th and finished 16th. I've gone for a 7 out of 10. You know, he got a fifth place finish in the sprint. I know he inherited about 17 positions from the amount of penalties there were, but still, it was you've got to finish there. You've got to not get the penalties in order to get the points, and he didn't. And then I think if you're judging it on the Sunday, you could give him a 2 out of 10. But you know, he's got a decent amount of points actually. He's got 4 points, so I think a 7 out of 10 is fair.
And you know, I'll agree with you. I'll also go with a 7. Usually when we do these, um, I'd go a grade higher, but you know, it's not Pierre Gasly finishing with 1 point in the sprint. It's actually 4 points for Lance Stroll, even though he inherited about 15 places, like you mentioned, from all the penalties. You've got to be there at the right place at the right time. And I think I've said the exact same quote about 16 times in this episode, but I'll reiterate it that you do have to be in the right place at the right time. And he was, and he got himself 4 points and four extra valuable points for Aston Martin. And yeah, it's a very good start to the Saturday, but then Saturday kind of afternoon and Saturday and Sunday afternoon, yeah, it's just abysmal in the bin. Like you said, it kind of balances itself out in a sense. Very good in the sprint, and then the race and qualifying just down here. So you kind of get a bit of an average. So I think an average is certainly a 7 out of 10.
Then on to those who did not finish in the main race. So Liam Lawson qualified 14th and finished 13th. Qualified for the race in 15th and did not finish. I'm going for a 5 out of 10 for Liam Lawson. He had a good sprint race. I know he sent Alonso into the wall, tried to assassinate him, but he did finish seventh on the road. And then in the actual race himself, I'm not going to put any blame on him because I think Doohan's just dive bombed down the inside. The move was never on, and taken out Lawson, and Lawson didn't really stand a chance from that point forward, did he? Because of the amount of damage to his car. But yeah, a 5 out of 10, I think is fair.
Get out of the way! I'm Liam Lawson. I'm Liam Lawson. I actually love this. I love that name, and I love the song. Um, yeah, I'm gonna stop getting myself so hyped and talk 5 out of 10 for Liam Lawson. It's just he had, the sprint was very good. The sprint could have been so nice if he hadn't, absolutely killed Fernando Alonso and sent him into the barrier. Um, and then, qualifying, getting himself through to Q2 was important, but then he got himself assassinated sort of by Jack Doohan. So all in all, slap bang down the middle with a 5 out of 10.
And next up, Gabriel Bortoleto qualified for the sprint in 19th and finished 15th, qualified for the race in 13th and did not finish. I'm going for a 6 out of 10. Very good job actually in qualifying. He's probably, apart from the Williams, one of the shocks, surprises. And then I suppose in the race as well, it's a mechanical issue, isn't it? That's caused him to retire. It's not something he's done. So he was on for a good result. He made up. He held his position and looked very solid. So I think he's very unlucky with that one, and I think he probably deserved a better result than he's got. And you look at his results this season, he probably does deserve a little bit more, given some of his performances. But it's just unfortunate, and what you get when you're in the worst car on the grid, unfortunately. But a 6 out of 10.
Yeah. Once again, I'll agree with you on a 6 out of 10. You kind of have to look at it from two perspectives because Hulkenberg was very strong on the Friday and the Saturday regarding the sprint, whereas Bortoleto wasn't. And then Bortoleto was very strong in qualifying and could have been challenging to finish where Nico Hulkenberg did in the race, which is about 13th, 14th, and we could be sat here kind of talking about a decent Bortoleto performance, but a mechanical failure saw him have to bow out from the race a little bit early. And he's shown his strengths in on one lap, getting himself through to Q2, but just obviously wasn't able to translate it into the race. But like you mentioned, it is what you get with the worst car on the grid, and Gabriel Bortoleto will just have to live with it until Audi comes along next season, takes over and revamps the car completely. But I still think he had a good performance. That's why I've given him a 6 out of 10.
Ollie Behrman now qualified for the sprint in 20th and finished 14th. Qualified for the race in 20th and did not finish. It's a difficult one. I think I'm going to go for a 5 out of 10. It's quite clear that, the qualifying's a bit of a weak spot. I think there's the sprint qualifying less so because he just couldn't get to the line. But then to be qualifying last again in actual qualifying is a little bit disappointing, especially when you consider how good he was in the sprint race. Got himself up to 8th, but that was all undone due to, I think it was an unsafe release, wasn't it? So he got the penalty, which dropped him right down. And then you can't, I think it's too early to judge anything in the sprint race, but I think with the two P20s in qualifying, and that's also his third 20th place qualification for the Grand Prix. I think that is an issue that needs fixing because there's no doubt in his raw speed and his overtaking and everything like that, but he's given himself too much work to do almost.
Is there too much work to do when he's qualifying 20th and making his way all the way up to the points in the sprint?
But imagine what he's going to do if he even puts it like 15th.
Yeah, of course. There's always that debate. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying that maybe he's doing it on purpose to put on a show. Question mark. But I've given him a 6 out of 10. A 6 out of 10. I think he's like we've talked about. He puts on a very great show in the races, in the sprint and in the race. It's just a poor qualifying. But it's a tricky one with Ollie Behrman because, like you've mentioned, he needs to sort out his qualifying performances. And if he's doing, like, for example, if he was to qualify in ninth for the race and not have a mechanical kind of failure, does he finish inside the points? Because Esteban Ocon can certainly qualify into Q3. Why can't Ollie Behrman? So it's fine margins. But if he is able to rectify his one lap pace, then maybe we can see Ollie Behrman in the points as a regular feature. But for now, it's a bit of a missed opportunity, I feel, in Miami. But I've still settled with a 6 out of 10.
And then finally, Jack Doohan, he qualified for the main race, or for the sprint race, sorry, in 17th and finished 16th. Qualified for the race in 14th and did not finish. I've gone for a 3 out of 10. I mean, it looks like it's going to be his last race in Formula One. I know Colapinto's only coming in for 5 races, but I can imagine that if he performs semi-okay, then that's going to be a to the end of the season type job. Disappointed with Doohan, but you look at the main race, starting 14th. He's starting 14th, like I said. He's in a good position. He didn't get the best start because obviously Lawson jumped ahead of him and he was starting behind him. But all he needs to do is just filter in, put that bad start behind him and then just settle in for the rest of the race. Who knows what's going to happen? Maybe he can make a position here and there. Bear in mind, his teammates started 4 places below him. So he's got something there. But he dives down the inside. It's completely reckless. I think it's completely on him. And just ruins any chance of that because he picks up damage. He's not even able to make it back to the pit lane, I don't think. And he's destroyed his race before it's got started. If you just filtered in, put that behind him, put that bad start behind him, and then move forward and see what he can do. He's probably, there's no reason to say Gasly's finished 13th. There's no reason to say he couldn't finish around that same ballpark, especially being in front of him. So I don't know. I think a little bit of rookie inexperience and a bit And you can tell from that. So disappointing. But I do think it's the last time we're going to see him in a Formula One car.
Yep. I've not really got much more to add on for Jack doing. I've gone with a 4 out of 10. There's not really much that you can talk about really because he's put himself in a great place in qualifying. He's just a little moment of recklessness and kind of rookie inexperience. And actually, if you look at it on the face of things, only two rookies finished that race in Antonelli and Hajar. The rest of them retired. Two mechanical, and two obviously car damage related. Um, so yeah, it's hard. But like you mentioned, it's probably the last time we'll see Jack doing. So au revoir, Jack. Um, See, I did it in French because Alpine, get it, get it, get it, get it, get it. But yeah, it's not really much to add on more. He's kind of not been able to get himself up to speed really, and kind of get the know-how from Pierre Gasly and kind of get himself up to speed. He's kind of been a little bit laxy daisy, where the Alpine has shown glimpses of a good race car, but he just wasn't able to get up to speed. Replaced by Franco, and probably going to be sat in the reserve role for the next 5 years or so until you know he gets an opportunity elsewhere. But for me, 4 out of 10, very very poor.
And that is that for our Miami Grand Prix review. Thank you all for listening and joining in. We will be back next week where we'll be looking back at our predictions for this week and looking ahead to Imola next weekend. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.